As the King and Queen leave the thrones and head for the exit of Westminster Abbey of the coronation Saturday, you'll see that everyone bows and curtsies to the King, and no one moves a limb, a muscle, when Camilla passes.
The chair beside Queen Camilla had been polished, positioned, and guarded, as though the King could enter at any moment. But when the orchestra began and the palace doors closed, Charles was nowhere to be seen. This was not illness, delay, or a scheduling mistake. The monarch had made a deliberate decision to abandon Camilla's most important palace event, and those standing closest to the throne already knew that his absence was not accidental. It was a warning. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Camilla had built the Royal Women in Service Gala around one powerful promise: senior royal women would be celebrated, and a new charitable leadership structure would be announced before diplomats, military representatives, trustees, charity directors, and senior household officials. A charitable leadership structure meant the system deciding which royal office controlled major causes, funding relationships, and public campaigns. Charles had been formally listed as guest of honor. His empty chair, therefore, carried more weight than any speech delivered that night. An aide approached Camilla minutes before her opening address and whispered that the king would not be coming. She tightened her grip on the lectern, looked once toward the untouched place setting, and ordered the program to continue. The queen consort understood the humiliation immediately. This was her largest independently organized palace event since the coronation, the ceremony that formally established Charles and Camilla as king and queen. Every important guest in the room could see that her husband had chosen absence over endorsement. Charles had made that choice hours earlier at Clarence House. The king stood in full evening dress while his equerry waited beside the prepared car. An equerry is a senior royal aide who manages personal duties and official movement. After several silent seconds, the monarch removed his ceremonial sash, laid it across a chair, and said, "Not tonight." He did not sound uncertain. He sounded finished. Palace communications later called the absence a last-minute diary adjustment, but that explanation collapsed quickly. Senior staff had already received instructions to remove the king's motorcade from the departure schedule hours before the gala began. Charles had not changed his mind at the last moment. He had planned not to appear. The reason lay inside the final program shown to him that morning. Catherine's name had vanished from the principal tribute, while Camilla's speech proposed placing several major royal charities beneath an office controlled directly by her household. To Charles, that was not administrative tidying. It was an attempt to redraw influence within the monarchy while publicly diminishing the Princess of Wales. Camilla knew the king had seen the evidence. She also knew someone close to the family had placed it before him deliberately. Yet the empty chair could not explain the full wound, because behind Charles's refusal stood three people with three very different fears, and one of them had far more to lose than a single evening of royal embarrassment. For Charles, the choice was cruelly personal. The woman waiting beneath the chandeliers was his wife, his closest companion, and the person he had defended through decades of public hostility. But the institution he inherited demanded something colder than loyalty. It demanded judgment. As Camilla faced the ballroom alone, and Catherine learned why her name had vanished, the king found himself trapped between the marriage he had protected and the future he was sworn to preserve. Charles had spent years securing Camilla's place within the monarchy. He had insisted that she be treated with dignity, trusted with serious duties, and allowed to build a public identity beyond old scandal. The king believed loyalty meant standing beside her when others stepped away. Yet the crown, the institution of royal authority and duty, carried by the monarch, required him to protect more than one person. It required him to defend the line of succession, public confidence, and the family's future. Catherine had become central to that future. Her early childhood work, family role, and connection with younger generations gave the monarchy something it desperately needed: continuity without coldness. Removing her from the gala's principal tribute was therefore not a simple editing decision. It suggested that the Princess of Wales could be publicly reduced while Camilla's household gained greater control over royal charities. Camilla felt the wound differently. After her speech, she dismissed 2 aides and sat alone before a mirror. The queen consort removed one earring with trembling fingers and asked why Charles had chosen to punish her before an entire ballroom instead of confronting her privately. She had survived years of hostility beside him. Now his absence felt like betrayal from the one person she believed would never abandon her. Catherine received the final printed program from William at Kensington Palace. She read the altered tribute twice, closed the folder carefully, and said she would not challenge Camilla in public. The princess understood that silence might protect the monarchy from scandal, but it could not erase the deliberate nature of the exclusion. William had learned about the change from a trustee through a documented private call. The trustee warned that several charities connected to Catherine were being shifted into a new coordinating office without her consent. A coordinating office would control shared strategy, access to donors, and public priorities across multiple royal causes. The prince immediately understood the danger. Charles feared something larger than one insult. He believed the gala was building an informal court around Camilla, supported by loyal courtiers and patrons who could later limit William and Catherine's influence. That fear became impossible to ignore when Princess Anne arrived at breakfast, carrying a sealed red folder. She placed it before her brother and insisted that he read every page before leaving. Anne's folder revealed the immediate danger, but the betrayal had begun weeks earlier, during one private ceremony, a moment so tense that those present would later describe it as the true point of no return. The gala crisis did not begin beneath the lights of Buckingham Palace. It began 3 weeks earlier, in a smaller room, behind closed doors, when a simple rehearsal became a struggle over precedence, legacy, and control. No cameras captured the moment. No official record acknowledged what was said. But one sentence from Camilla altered the atmosphere instantly, leaving Catherine silent, Anne furious, and Charles unaware that the foundations of his own household had begun to shift beneath him. Preparations had once promised unity. The Royal Women in Service Gala was designed as a joint celebration of Camilla, Anne, Sophie, and Catherine, with each woman receiving equal recognition for a distinct area of public duty. The program was meant to honor years of service without turning the evening into a contest over rank. That balance mattered, because every name, speech, and order of appearance would signal how the monarchy valued its senior women. Camilla's household later introduced a Royal Women's Charitable Council. The proposed council was an administrative body meant to coordinate funding, patronages, national campaigns, and shared public appearances. On paper, it promised efficiency. In practice, it would place several important decisions beneath an office controlled by the Queen Consort's closest advisors. Tension broke during a private rehearsal in Buckingham Palace's White Drawing Room. Camilla told Catherine that her tribute would be shortened because this evening must reflect the authority that exists now, not the authority people expect later. The Princess of Wales remained composed, but the meaning was brutal. Her future role was being treated as a threat to the power held in the present. Anne reacted immediately. The Princess Royal pushed her chair back and demanded to know whether the gala existed to honor service or establish rank. Camilla answered that someone had to maintain order while the king's health and workload remained unpredictable. Sophie heard the exchange and tried to calm the room, but even she understood that the rehearsal had crossed into something far more dangerous. Catherine refused to argue. Her silence protected the dignity of the occasion, yet it also gave Camilla's private secretary room to act. That evening, he authorized a revised program removing the princess from the principal tribute and placing her early years initiative beneath the proposed council's supervision. Anne later obtained the unreleased speech through a documented review of gala materials. One passage promised that the council would continue under the continuing guidance of the Queen, even after William assumed greater responsibility. The Princess Royal saw the implication at once. Camilla's influence was being designed to survive the transition of power. Anne copied the revised program, council proposal, and speech draft into one red folder. On the morning of the gala, she placed it before Charles and warned him that silence would be mistaken for consent. Charles could no longer dismiss the dispute as tension between strong personalities, and before the palace car was due to depart, husband and wife finally faced each other without advisors to soften what had to be said. The confrontation lasted less than 20 minutes, but it destroyed every polite explanation the palace later attempted to offer. Charles entered Camilla's sitting room, holding the red folder beneath one arm. She recognized it immediately. Before either of them sat down, the king placed the papers on a small table and asked a question that cut through years of loyalty. Why had she used his name to build an authority he had never granted? Charles had arrived roughly 2 hours before the gala, when Camilla's dress, jewelry, and ceremonial order were already prepared nearby. Ceremonial order is the official sequence governing entrances, speeches, seating, and public roles during a royal event. The queen consort believed her husband had come to discuss timings. She assumed the proposed charitable council had already passed through the usual household approval process and expected no serious resistance. The king opened the folder and pointed to one sentence. With the full confidence of His Majesty. His anger was controlled, but that restraint made it sharper. Charles told her she had attached his authority to a structure he had never read, never approved, and never authorized in writing. The phrase made the council appear to carry the monarch's direct support, turning an internal proposal into something far more powerful. Camilla defended herself at once. She argued that the monarchy had become paralyzed by competing households, overlapping charities, and constant battles over influence. In her view, one coordinating office would end the confusion. Then her voice broke. The Queen accused William and Catherine of preparing for a reign that had not begun, while everyone around Charles treated her own position as temporary. Charles did not deny her fear, but he named the deeper offense. The council could be debated. Catherine's removal could not. The king believed the altered program had been designed to humiliate the Princess of Wales and force her charities beneath Camilla's control before she could object. That, he said, crossed the line between administration and personal power. Camilla closed the folder. When Charles demanded that Catherine's tribute be restored and the council announcement withdrawn, she refused. Changing the program hours before the gala, she argued, would make her appear powerless before every guest she had invited. The king stood in silence. Years of loyalty pressed against one final decision, but the choice had already been made. Charles walked to the door and paused without turning. If the program remains unchanged, my chair will remain empty. Camilla said nothing. She allowed the door to close behind him, knowing that silence had become her answer. The confrontation explained why Charles stayed away, but it did not explain how Camilla's proposal had advanced so far, because behind the gala stood a network of officials who believed the Queen's plan could permanently reshape palace power. Royal power rarely moves through dramatic proclamations. It moves through meeting notes, revised job descriptions, charitable signatures, and officials who know how to turn temporary arrangements into permanent authority. Camilla's council had been presented as harmless coordination, yet its wording would have placed funding decisions, public campaigns, and access to the Queen beneath one central office. Charles now understood that skipping the gala was only the beginning. He would also have to dismantle the machinery built behind it. The proposed Royal Women's Charitable Council would have coordinated nearly 24 patronages linked to Camilla, Catherine, Anne, and Sophie. A patronage is an official relationship in which a royal supports a charity by lending attention, credibility, and public influence. Supporters argued that one central office would reduce repeated work, prevent competing announcements, and make decisions faster, while Charles reduced engagements and William accepted more visible duties. The promise of efficiency concealed a struggle for control. Anne summoned Camilla's senior private secretary to a small palace office and placed the council document between them. A private secretary is the principal official who manages a royal's duties, correspondence, and major decisions. The princess asked why Catherine had never been consulted before her projects were listed beneath another household's authority. The official replied that consultation would have delayed approval. Anne heard the truth behind the polished answer. The exclusion had been deliberate. Charles faced a harsher discovery alone. The king read meeting minutes showing that aides had repeatedly described his approval as a formality. Formality meant they expected his signature without meaningful debate. He lowered his fountain pen and realized his silence had created permission. His reluctance to challenge Camilla had encouraged courtiers to believe the queen consort could speak for him whenever he hesitated. One clause made the plan even more dangerous. A hidden continuity provision allowed the council to remain under Camilla's guidance during a transition of reign unless the next sovereign formally dissolved it. In plain terms, her office could continue directing those charities even after William assumed the crown. The records revealed another calculated choice. William's household had been excluded because one courtier feared the prince would reject any arrangement restricting Catherine's independence. The future king had not been overlooked. He had been kept away. Charles no longer saw administrative overreach. He saw authority being built around his silence and carried toward his son's reign. Before midnight, the monarch signed a counter-order suspending the council proposal and demanding a review of every instruction issued in his name. A counter-order is a formal command that halts or reverses an earlier decision. The signature froze the entire structure immediately. Camilla learned of the action through a documented call from her secretary. Her anger was no longer about one empty chair. Charles had challenged the people closest to her and the power they believed they had secured. By morning, the gala's glitter had faded, the council had been frozen, and Camilla was about to discover that Charles's empty chair had become a direct challenge to the authority of her entire household. The morning after the gala, Buckingham Palace looked unchanged. Guards took their positions, correspondents moved between offices, and the public gates opened as usual. Inside, however, Camilla's household was in crisis. The triumphant announcement had been removed from the royal website. Trustees were canceling meetings. Staff members who had celebrated hours earlier were suddenly avoiding one another's eyes. Then Camilla received Charles's written order and understood that his absence had been the first step in a much larger withdrawal of trust. The planned press release, establishing the charitable council, vanished before publication. Recordings of Camilla's speech were edited to remove every reference to its future authority. A press release is an official statement prepared for the media, and withdrawing it meant the palace no longer wished to defend the plan publicly. Charity directors who had attended the gala began contacting William's and Catherine's offices, asking whether their organizations had ever approved the proposed restructuring. Most had not. Camilla received the suspension order at breakfast. A footman delivered a cream envelope bearing the king's private seal, the mark used to confirm that a message came directly from the monarch. She read the opening lines while standing, then slowly lowered herself into a chair when she reached the instruction freezing all council activity. Her anger arrived first. Fear followed almost immediately. Camilla told her private secretary that Charles had abandoned her before the public and stripped away her work in private. The queen consort insisted that years of service had now been reduced to one accusation: ambition. When the official tried to reassure her that the crisis would pass, she answered that every decision she made would now be treated as a hidden attempt to seize control. The consequences deepened before noon. 2 senior members of Camilla's household lost access to cross-palace planning meetings, while investigators examined whether royal authority had been misrepresented in official correspondence. Cross-palace meetings brought different royal households together to coordinate major events and public duties. Losing access meant her closest advisors could no longer shape decisions beyond her own office. Camilla requested a private lunch with Charles, hoping to force an immediate reconciliation. The king declined. Instead, he spent the afternoon with Anne, reviewing the continuity clause and its consequences for a future reign. His refusal wounded her more than the suspension order because it showed that he was not ready to return to familiar loyalty. William then made the move no one expected. The prince did not celebrate her defeat or demand a public apology. He asked to meet Camilla alone, without Charles, Anne, Catherine, or palace secretaries present. Camilla understood the danger of that invitation. William could arrive as the future king preparing judgment, or as the wounded husband demanding answers. Yet she accepted, because silence had already cost her too much. Camilla expected William to arrive as an accuser, but when the door closed and the two were finally alone, the future king offered her something far more difficult than victory: a chance to tell the truth. There were no lawyers, no private secretaries, and no prepared statements when William entered the room. For years, every exchange between them had carried the weight of Diana, public judgment, and the complicated loyalty both owed Charles. This time, the prince did not begin with accusation. He moved a chair closer, sat opposite Camilla, and asked one simple question: had she removed Catherine because she wanted control, or because she was terrified of becoming irrelevant? William believed suspensions and investigations could expose misconduct, but they could not settle the deeper conflict. This crisis was about belonging, succession, and the fear of being pushed aside. Succession meant the planned transfer of royal authority from one monarch to the next, and every approaching change threatened to rearrange influence inside the family. With the council frozen and her staff under scrutiny, Camilla faced the possibility that Charles would permanently limit her independent role. Camilla did not answer quickly. Then the queen consort admitted what no official statement ever could. "Every room changed when Catherine entered," she said, "because people instinctively looked toward the future." Camilla had spent years earning acceptance, surviving hostility, and building a place beside the king. Now she felt that place disappearing before Charles's reign had even ended. William understood the loneliness behind those words, but sympathy did not weaken his boundary. The prince told her that Catherine would never surrender her work, so another person could feel secure. His wife's dignity was not negotiable. Neither were the charities she had built through years of public service. Camilla then revealed that the council had been partly defensive. Through recorded discussions with her senior aides, she had been warned that certain courtiers were preparing to move every major family initiative into William's household during the next transition. They claimed she would be left with ceremonial appearances, but no meaningful voice. Fear had turned that warning into urgency, and urgency had become control. William asked whether she now understood the damage. Camilla said she did. The queen consort agreed to dissolve the council permanently, restore Catherine's tribute in the official gala record, and remove the two aides who had pushed the plan forward without direct royal approval. She wrote the commitment by hand because William wanted no polished language and no room for reinterpretation. Camilla signed her name, then looked at him and asked whether Charles would ever forgive her. The prince did not promise forgiveness. He only said the king deserved the truth before deciding what came next. William carried the handwritten agreement to his father. Charles now faced a final choice: punish the woman he had defended for decades, or rebuild trust under boundaries neither of them could ignore again. The private agreement changed the direction of the crisis. But before Charles could respond, the story escaped the palace walls, and one unforgettable image transformed a family dispute into a national judgment. By sunrise, the palace could no longer contain the image. Across Britain, front pages carried the same photograph: Camilla standing beneath the golden ballroom lights, while the king's vacant chair remained visible beside her. The picture required no explanation. To some, it showed a queen publicly abandoned. To others, it showed a monarch finally drawing a line. As broadcasters reconstructed the missing motorcade and altered program, public sympathy divided, but the meaning of Charles's absence became impossible to disguise. Television networks quickly abandoned the palace's claim of a last-minute diary change. A royal diary is the official schedule recording engagements, travel, and private duties planned for senior members of the family. Correspondents confirmed that Charles had remained at Clarence House, where he held private meetings during the gala, rather than withdrawing from work entirely. The king had not been unavailable. He had chosen not to stand beside Camilla. The country split around two painful interpretations. Some viewers saw the queen consort as a wife humiliated before diplomats, military leaders, and charity trustees. Others focused on Catherine's removal from the principal tribute and argued that the event had become a battle over who would shape the monarchy's future. Sympathy moved in both directions because the crisis contained two truths. Camilla had suffered publicly, but Catherine had been diminished deliberately. The Daily Chronicle captured the national mood with a front page showing Charles's empty chair beneath the headline, "The King Who Would Not Applaud." A smaller image showed Camilla looking toward the vacant place before beginning her speech. The photograph transformed a private dispute into a public verdict. His absence now looked less like neglect and more like refusal. Visitors gathered near Buckingham Palace as the image spread across their phones. One elderly woman placed flowers beside the railings, with a handwritten card reading, "Service is not ownership." Broadcasters repeated the phrase throughout the morning, and its message reached directly into the heart of the scandal. Royal duty could be honored, but it could not be possessed. Palace officials finally acknowledged part of the truth. They confirmed that the charitable council had been suspended, and that the official gala record would be corrected to restore Catherine's contribution. An official record is the permanent palace account of an event, including speeches, honors, and formal acknowledgments. Restoring her name meant admitting that the earlier version had been wrong. Camilla then released a brief written statement through her household. She accepted that the proposal had advanced without sufficient consultation and confirmed it would not proceed. The Queen blamed neither Charles, William, Catherine, nor Anne. For the first time, she carried the responsibility herself. Public anger began to soften, but trust remained wounded. Charles summoned Camilla, William, Catherine, and Anne to Windsor Castle for one final family meeting. The nation had already formed its verdict from one empty chair, but inside Windsor, Charles was preparing a quieter and more consequential judgment, one that would determine whether his marriage and monarchy could survive the same truth. The final meeting did not end with exile, triumph, or revenge. It ended with boundaries. Charles entered the room, carrying no red folder and no prepared speech. Camilla sat opposite Catherine, while William and Anne remained close enough to intervene, but chose not to. The king looked first at his wife, then at the family whose future had been placed at risk, and delivered a verdict that was both deeply personal and unmistakably royal. Affection could remain, but authority would never again be assumed. Charles confirmed that the Royal Women's Charitable Council would be permanently dissolved. The proposed body had been designed to coordinate charities and public campaigns across several royal households, but it had become a path toward centralized control. Catherine, Anne, Sophie, and Camilla would each retain independent authority over their own patronages and initiatives. A patronage is an official relationship through which a royal supports a charity with attention, influence, and public service. The king then established new safeguards. Every future cross-household program would require his written approval and formal consultation with William's office. No courtier would again be permitted to use implied consent, private assumptions, or uncertainty about the next reign to create a permanent structure. Charles turned toward Camilla and spoke without anger. He admitted that skipping the gala had been one of the most painful choices of their marriage, yet attending would have meant publicly approving Catherine's humiliation and supporting an authority he had never granted. The Queen Consort listened without interruption. Then she faced the Princess of Wales directly and admitted that fear had hardened into control. Catherine accepted the apology, but she did not pretend the damage had disappeared. Trust, she said, would return through actions rather than ceremony. Camilla understood the boundary. Forgiveness could begin, but it could not erase responsibility. William rejected revenge. The prince asked that Camilla retain her existing charities and public duties, arguing that accountability should restore balance rather than create another cycle of exclusion. Anne supported him because the Princess Royal had never sought punishment. She had sought protection before ambition became permanent power. Charles ordered the official gala archive corrected so that Catherine, Anne, Sophie, and Camilla would be recognized equally for their service. An official archive is the palace's permanent record of speeches, honors, and decisions. The empty chair remained in the photographs, but its meaning was finally acknowledged. Charles had stayed away because supporting his wife could not mean surrendering the crown's future. Camilla lost the authority she had tried to secure, yet she was not cast out. Catherine's dignity was restored, William proved capable of restraint, and Anne's warning stopped a dangerous imbalance before it became permanent. There was no further mystery after Windsor. The empty chair had not marked the collapse of Charles's marriage, but the moment he finally separated private devotion from royal duty, and in doing so, preserved both with limits neither could ignore. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.